Welcome, everyone. This is Danny and Carl with Get Wisdom, and today we're going to continue with the channeling series. And today's channeling subject is Rudolf Steiner, who was alive back at the turn of the century. He died in 1925. He's what many would consider a polymath. He was an expert in many different fields, had interests in many different fields. He was a clairvoyant, philosopher, social reformer, architect, economist, a metaphysicist, and he is also responsible for the Waldorf school, started the Waldorf school idea in the schools themselves, and also biodynamic farming. And he went from theosophy to anthroposophy. Help me, Carl. I think I'm still pronouncing that word incorrectly.
From what I understand, it's anthroposophy.
Anthroposophy, correct.
Anthroposophy.
Posophy. Okay, thank you. I kind of set myself up to say that word wrong, no matter how many attempts.
It's
I've
not
made
my
that.
favorite word, so you have my sympathy totally. No offense
Yeah,
to Rudolf Steiner,
yeah. Well,
but
he's
jargon
not.
is jargon. It's challenging.
Yeah, and among some circles, he's very well known and very highly regarded. And on the other hand, a lot of people don't know anything about him. And I just found out that huge numbers of parents who send their children to Waldorf schools haven't even heard of him, which was very surprising to me. But anyway, thanks everybody for joining us, and thank you especially Carl for doing this channeling with us today. And with that, maybe we can have a little discussion about a subject like this and channeling in general.
Sure. Thank you, Danny. Thanks for watching this. We hope to reach as many people as we can to help convey the information we are learning. Our motive is, as researchers, as seekers of hidden truth, and really the reality of the divine, to probe it, look at the limits of awareness, and how better to go about bringing that knowledge forward. That's not an easy thing. There are so many voices, so many differing schools of thought, so many conflicts and competing ideas and vested interests and cultural taboos and constraints that are based on prejudice and old grievances and on and on. This is in every field of endeavor. And when we deal with someone like Rudolf Steiner, who was kind of a Renaissance man, he clearly was a larger than life kind of fellow, having a command of multiple disciplines that probably to most people seem to have nothing to do with one another.
Yeah.
But I think the reality of existence and what we're piecing together, adding little puzzle pieces at a time to the big picture with the help of creator of all that is that there is a unified theory, if you will. This is the big quest of Einstein, the unified field theory that would rationalize all of the laws of physics and tie things together in a nice, neat little package with a bow. And I think if you want to speak in generalities, probably mathematics is the common denominator really in everything. Mm-hmm. So here's a fellow who had a natural gift in mathematics. That's no surprise, no accident in someone who is also a metaphysician and a deep thinker about many arenas of life, because they are interconnected. And we all have to get along. We have to live. We have to provide our own creature comforts and all of that. And every time you turn around, you bump into a problem, a limitation, as well as opportunities that sometimes technology helps us with. And so it gets to be life is an ongoing quest for betterment and using the tools available. So this was a guy who was sort of like a crafter of tools. He pursued ways of thinking about the world. And those people are a precious resource.
Yeah.
And so we like to go and talk to people like this who have graduated from the earth plane, gone back home to the light, and they're available to us through Creator of all it is to connect to and channel. And through reviewing some things that we think are interesting or useful to know about the individual's life here, we can learn a little bit more. Not only what they came up with as a human being, but how it fits into the larger picture. Maybe what they were truly circling around, but maybe hadn't yet fully understood themselves, but they were on the right track, for example. And those kind of people, sort of like the bloodhounds of truth,
Mm-hmm.
have an ability to share more with us than a neutral party, like God itself, because they had a karmic entanglement here, an involvement personally.
Right.
They devoted their energy and their time and their heart pursuing things. And because of that, they have more of a voice than the average person in talking about something. It's sort of like being the victim of a crime or the perpetrator. Those people have a little special standing in talking about, a sad event that leads to some sort of a blow up. And you can learn from talking to those participants, those directly involved. So that's more or less what we're after with this series, to go to the people who know. And not only because they were working on something during their life and became somewhat expert or the expert, depending, but back in the light, they have that divine level viewpoint and vantage point where they know vast quantities of information that humans know nothing about whatsoever. And it doesn't mean they can start catapulting us into the 22nd century just because we show up. And they can download stuff to us that can give us all sorts of amazing advantages. And it doesn't work that way because this communication is special. It's allowed for special reasons. It's done for something that needs to be a high level purpose that can advance us in some way, but inevitably will be somewhat incremental. They can't leap way out in front of us because that is considered leading. And the divine realm isn't allowed to do that. They can inspire, which is more like encouragement. So if you're on a quest and you get inspiration along the way, it will be when maybe you start looking at the right thing, the right path. And then you get an inner kind of buzz going. Ooh, yeah, this looks intriguing. Yeah, it is intriguing. And what's happening is your higher self or creator is talking to you and saying, oh, how about that? Isn't that kind of amazing? Doesn't that look pretty intriguing? It's a hint and an encouragement to follow your instinct. And that's how they get things done. They don't necessarily write you a telegram and say, show up at this latitude and longitude with a shovel.
Right.
And you can unearth the Ark of the Covenant or whatever might be the case.
Right.
They leave research to the human, but supply inspiration. So that's the kind of thing we get with the channeling. It's even though we're talking to them directly, it will tend to be a little bit of a further reach than we had before. And sometimes people come away feeling like, well, what's the big whoop? We didn't really advance this all that much or whatever. But if you look back, there will be many things that have been described that lead to a rich and profound understanding of the fabric of things. And a lot of things can get lost in the shovel, especially when, technically speaking, we know nothing about the divine realm and how they think. So all these channelings are a profound demonstration and a clue about how they think. They're still speaking with our language, my language, so I can understand it. And in response to the level of questions we can come up with, and they're only so lofty, only so informed, and all of that. And that constrains what they can answer. So you can blame us in part, at least, for not knowing all the dirty details and all the curiosities and the profound things and the amazing and maybe the salacious if there's some kind of wrongdoing someone has been involved with or a suspicion and so on.
But it's
But
only
that isn't the intention. It's not to entertain. It's
yeah,
to enlighten.
and any
So,
time that we've gone in that direction, the disappointment's been even greater because that's not something that the divine realm, the light beings themselves, are going to engage in generally, for the reasons of protection and karmic entanglement, like we've said so many times. So, for my part in this, I try to craft the questions knowing where there might be some interest and some feedback rather than just, picking at the wound, like, going
right.
for the salacious details where we don't get any responses about that kind of stuff anyway. So, and then one thing I want to mention, that might be true for not only myself, but other people who followed the series is that, as we've followed the series and learn more things that aren't, earth shattering or whatever, we still get a kind of like a framework for a worldview from the divine realm's perspective that helps us with discernment in other areas. Like just before we started recording today, Carl and I were talking about some other research out there and how the stuff that I used to look into, very thoroughly doesn't interest me as much anymore because I can kind of use what I've learned through the channeling series as kind of like a guide for, where is my time best spent? It feels like, and I believe this to be the case, that I have a better ability to identify things that aren't divine in the divine alignment. They're corrupted. They're not going to tell me the truth or useful things that are going to be helpful to to my inquiry or answer my questions accurately, that kind of thing. Not necessarily that it's nefarious, but just that it's misleading and it's not in divine alignment. So it seems that those kinds of things are getting easier to recognize and thus saving me time.
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, this is something I think that surprises a lot of folks. That if you have the good fortune to talk to a being in the divine realm and ask questions about something, and if your questions are based on a falsehood, they can't correct you.
Yeah, that's a good point.
They have to allow your belief that's erroneous to exist. This is called free will. And you think, well, what use is that? What good is that? Well, that's just the way it is. That's the rules of the road. We're allowed to disbelieve. We're allowed to be in the wrong, have a wrong-headed notion or wrong factual information. It's only if we go and ask the question, well, is it really true that such and such is the right way to describe this or explain it?
Yes.
Then they can follow your lead and help you to a better understanding.
Right.
But if you've already made up your mind and you know such and such happened because you saw it on the internet or whatever, and go and ask about it, you might get a kind of a vague, non-definitive,
non-committal
description that doesn't pull the rug out from under the idea, but won't add to it because they won't do that either. They won't reward a bad idea.
Right. Or embellish it.
And make it more appealing or contribute to the lie, but they can't take the lie away from you unless you invite that to happen. So you have to kind of know what you're doing or be doing the work with an open mind to begin with.
Yeah,
to allow for your own faults.
Yeah, be willing to question some of your a priori assumptions or your foundational beliefs that led to the question in the first place. And so it's a challenge. Okay, so for Rudolf Steiner, we have 6 questions today, and potentially a long channeling because I think some of the questions are going to kind of lead into some other areas, which often happens So maybe with that, we can go ahead and get started.
All right, I'm with you. I'll go ahead and get in the state of consciousness I need to make the connection. I do my channeling through the creator of all that is, and I do that for accuracy and to make it valid and for safety reasons so that we will not be interfered with by any competing voice. That's very important. Most channeling is corrupted. It is well-meaning, almost totally, but people can end up talking to an imposter. There's lots of other voices out there that would be happy to talk to anyone and engage with them and kind of keep them sidelined with some fluff, some happy talk and encouragement, but nothing of real substance. They won't help people really grow. And so it serves to cordon them off because they think they're tapped in now. They've got the answers and a source they can go to, and they develop a friendship. And it's very sad, but it happens all the time. And that's why our message and what we hear from the people we talk to can be so different from what is mostly out there. It's because there's a reason why that most people are getting a hand holding. They're being minded. And it's to keep everyone complacent and not give people real tools they can use for improving things. So that's the as short as I can make it, kind of capsule summary, just to make clear to people that message, because I know it's an important one.
Right.
You can't just go to all channeling and assume it's all divine and all pristine and all helpful. The opposite is the case. And in fact, most of it is such that if you get on the email list and interact with them and buying products and so on, you'll go on notice by the darkness that you have interests they don't want to see encouraged. And you'll get some personal hand-holding from them. They'll come and work on you and your mind. So people don't want to hear that, but it's just the way the world works right now. We're all being manipulated, or the attempt is made all day long to program our subconscious to keep us away from spirituality and talk about extraterrestrials. There's certain hot button topics for the hidden cabal, and the idea of really understanding who's running the world and this sort of thing, that's all off limits. And that's why you don't ever see these things talked about for the most part on the mainstream. So we're kind of leaping into the unknown in a bit, but also taking some risks here. But we're doing it through the divine, and that's one of the reasons why too. So we can get to a source that's valid. So I will go ahead and connect to Rudolf Steiner, and he will let us know when he's here.
Okay, thank you.
This is Rudolf Steiner speaking.
Thank you for joining us. You are noted as one who introduced many to the idea of higher realms. Now that you're a light being, can you give us your description of what it is like to go from being a human to returning to humanity's true home?
There are many analogies one could make. Perhaps being in quicksand and then being freed once again to roam about and see more than what you could in your trapped state of existence. It is very much like being in a kind of prison, in fact. You are virtually an animal with the animal need and imperative to serve the body as a physical entity with energy requirements, oxygenation, water, shelter from minor changes in temperature and other natural forces of weather. This is entirely different from the realm you are used to as a light being. And in the heavenly realm, you have freedom of movement throughout not only the entire universe, but many other dimensions which contain life and amazing wonders of energy and ideas. Consciousness abounds. It is a multi-layered construction of thought, interaction, and consequence. Thoughts truly are things, and they truly make things go. This you know as a light being, but does not happen in your world. There are only minimal things you can do energetically with your mind in a physical sense, on a physical level. So we are simply pointing out that there is no frame of reference available to the human being to truly understand the life of a light being. You can conceive of it perhaps in science fiction terms with the notion of teleportation and time travel taken together, where you can go instantly anywhere you choose without a vehicle. You can go backwards in time. You can go forwards in time. You can do both sequentially. And you might do both simultaneously and be in communication with yourself, exploring the current reality just prior to your voyage. This is only speaking, of course, of a single dimension. And with the interplay of dimensions as your playground as well, there are limitless possibilities. This is why freedom is total. Not all choose to be explorers and pioneers and enter all available realms. Some have very formidable complications that are even a challenge to a light being. This is because everything in existence is a composite of energy and consciousness as another form of energy, or totally energy that can be of differing kinds. Even consciousness is comprised of differing energies. This you know nothing about as yet, but all of it represents an opportunity for things to happen that will be motivated and launched into new expression by your desire to play and to expand on things of interest to you personally that may contribute to your growth further or may help another in the understanding or execution of a grand plan for something to come about. There are constraints on all organisms, to use a fundamental term you can relate to, but the constraints are more about conduct than on creation of borders and limits on movement and so on. So this is the best we can do as a kind of first glimpse of what awaits you on your return. You will fit right in because you came from where I am. And you will not need a tutorial because your lineage is such you will already be quite conversant with all that happens. And you will view your time within the earth plane with keen interest and great joy as well, that you took the plunge, so to speak, the plunge into the quicksand and did things the hard way for a while. And hopefully made some advancements in your personal growth, depth of understanding, and healing of past difficulties while contributing something to the human enterprise itself on a wider scale.
Okay, thank you. Goethe was a great influence, and allegedly from his work, you deduced that intuitive reach could be developed in each person and was not something that would just happen by chance. Now that you're a light being, can you tell us more about the human capability to know that which cannot be known from our normal senses?